The boxing coach grabbed Keanu's wrist and twisted it hard. The grip was tight, deliberate, meant to intimidate. "Old man, this gym is for real fighters, not Hollywood actors playing pretend." His voice echoed across the entire gym floor. Every head turned. Punching bags stopped swinging. Jump ropes hit the ground. The entire gym went silent. You could hear breathing. You could feel tension thick in the air like smoke. Some people pulled out their phones instinctively. They knew something was about to go down. Others just stared, wide-eyed, unable to believe what they were seeing. A famous actor, being manhandled, in broad daylight, in front of everyone. But here's the thing. What the coach didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Keanu Reeves wasn't just some actor who took a few fight choreography lessons for the cameras. He wasn't a weekend warrior. He wasn't a celebrity trying to look tough on Instagram. Keanu had trained with world champion fighters for over 20 years. Judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, Krav Maga, tactical firearms training. Hours every single day, not for movies, not for fame, but because he respected the discipline, the craft, the warriors who came before him. He'd sparred with legends. Trained in dojos where egos got checked at the door and only skill mattered. He had rolled with black belts who could tie a man in knots before he even realized what happened. And this coach, this loud, arrogant bully, he had no idea who he was messing with. The coach tightened his grip even more, veins bulging in his forearm, smirking like he'd already won some invisible contest. He wanted everyone to see him dominate, to remind them who ran this place. But Keanu didn't flinch, didn't pull away, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, calm, centered, breathing steady, like a man who had been in far worse situations and walked out without a scratch. And then, in the span of maybe 2 seconds, everything changed. What happened in the next 60 seconds would not just shock everyone in that gym. It would go viral within hours. It would cost the coach everything he thought he had built. And it would remind the world of a truth most people forget. The quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous. Not because they want to hurt anyone, but because they don't need to prove anything. They've already done the work. They've already walked the path. And when pushed, really pushed, they don't explode. They respond, with precision, with control, with a level of skill that leaves you speechless. What that coach was about to experience would haunt him for the rest of his life. Not because Keanu hurt him, but because Keanu showed him, and everyone watching, exactly what real strength looks like. And it wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it wasn't cruel, it was silent, swift, and absolutely undeniable. Before we continue, comment below where you're watching from, and salute to everyone who stays humble no matter how skilled, how famous, or how powerful they become. Because this story, it's about to get unforgettable. It was 6 a.m. on a cold Thursday morning at Iron Fist Boxing Gym in downtown Los Angeles. The sun was barely up. The streets outside were still quiet, except for the occasional rumble of delivery trucks and early commuters. But inside Iron Fist, it was already alive, heavy bags swinging, speed bags rattling, the sharp smack of leather gloves hitting pads, grunts of effort, the squeak of shoes on canvas. This wasn't some trendy fitness studio with mood lighting and motivational quotes on the walls. This was old school, concrete floors, peeling paint, the smell of sweat, rubber, and decades of hard work soaked into every corner. And ruling over it all like a king on a throne, Coach Marcus the Hammer Davidson, 6'2", broad shoulders, shaved head, permanent scowl, former amateur boxing champion back in his day, never made it pro, but he made sure everyone knew he could have if things had been different, if the refs hadn't been corrupt, if his manager hadn't screwed him over, if the world had just given him his shot. That bitterness, it never left him. And now, 20 years later, he ran this gym like it owed him something. Marcus had built a reputation on two things: breaking egos and exposing phonies. He loved calling people out, loved making examples of anyone who walked in thinking they were tough, especially if they had money, especially if they were famous, especially if they seemed soft. His students feared him, not respected, feared. There's a difference. Respect is earned. Fear is demanded, and Marcus demanded it every single day. His assistants obeyed him without question, like soldiers under a tyrant. And anyone who disagreed, anyone who challenged him, anyone who dared question his methods, they were shown the door. No refunds, no second chances, just gone. That Thursday morning, Marcus was in rare form. He strutted through the gym like a peacock, chest puffed out, gold Rolex flashing on his wrist, the one he wore specifically so people would notice. He stopped in front of a teenager, maybe 16, working on footwork drills in the corner. The kid was trying, sweating, focused, but his feet weren't perfect. "What is that?" Marcus barked, loud enough for everyone to hear. The kid froze. "You're shuffling like a confused chicken. You think that's boxing? That's embarrassing."
Sorry, coach, I'm trying.
Trying, G, you think Muhammad Ali tried? You think Tyson tried?
No, they did.
And you?
"You're wasting my time." The kid's face went red. His hands dropped. He looked at the floor. Marcus smirked and moved on, satisfied. Across the gym, a woman in her 30s was working the heavy bag. She wasn't fast. She wasn't powerful. But she was consistent. Determined. She'd been coming every morning for 2 months, slowly building her strength and confidence. Marcus walked up behind her, arms crossed, watching her with a look of exaggerated disappointment. "You gonna tickle that bag to death, or actually hit it?" She stopped, breathing hard, gloves still raised. "I'm doing my best, coach, your best." "Sweetheart, a 10-year-old hits harder than that. Maybe stick to yoga." A few guys nearby chuckled, not because it was funny, but because that's what you did when Marcus made a joke. You laughed. Or you became the next target. The woman's jaw tightened, but she didn't say anything. She just turned back to the bag and kept going. Marcus grinned and walked toward the mirror, flexing his arms, admiring himself between sets. Still got it. He muttered to himself. This was his kingdom, his rules, his ego on full display. And then at exactly 6:47 a.m., the front door opened. No announcement. No fanfare. Just the soft creak of hinges and a gust of cool morning air. A man stepped inside, black hoodie, hood down, worn out Nike sneakers, faded jeans. A simple gym bag slung over one shoulder, dark hair a little messy, calm expression, no sunglasses, no entourage, no bodyguards. Just a guy. He walked quietly across the gym floor, his footsteps light, almost soundless. He didn't look around for attention. Didn't check to see if anyone recognized him. He just walked straight to the front desk, where a young receptionist, a college kid named Melissa, was finishing her coffee. She glanced up, and her eyes went wide. She recognized him immediately, but to her credit, she stayed professional, calm, respectful. "Good morning," the man said with a small smile. "I'd like to sign up for a trial session." His voice was soft, polite, no ego, no expectation of special treatment. Melissa nodded quickly, pulling out a clipboard. "Of course, sir. Just fill this out and we can get you." "Hold on." The voice cut through the air like a blade. Heavy footsteps approached from behind. Coach Marcus appeared, arms still crossed, sweat dripping from his forehead from his last workout. He looked the man up and down slowly, deliberately, eyes narrowed, a smirk pulling at the corner of his mouth. He saw the hoodie, the old sneakers, the lack of flashy gear, and he made his judgment in 2 seconds. "We full," Marcus said flatly. The man blinked. "The sign outside says walk-ins welcome." "Yeah," Marcus said, stepping closer. "For fighters. Not for actors looking for Instagram content." Melissa's face went pale. She wanted to say something, but she knew better. A few gym members nearby stopped mid-rep. Some pulled out their phones, others just watched, sensing the tension building like a storm cloud. The man stayed calm, didn't react, didn't get defensive. He just replied evenly, "I'm just here to train. No cameras, no trouble." Marcus laughed loud, mocking, cruel. He turned to his crew, the regulars who always hung around him like a pack. "You hear this guy? Just here to train. Brother, this isn't a movie set. We don't do stunts here. We do real damage." A couple guys laughed on cue. The man didn't flinch, didn't argue. He just stood there, gym bag still on his shoulder, waiting. Melissa looked down at her clipboard, gripping her pen tight, wishing she could disappear. And Keanu Reeves, because yes, that's exactly who it was, just exhaled quietly and stayed silent. He'd been in enough real fights, real dojos, real dangerous situations to know. You don't fight ego with ego. You just wait, and let the truth reveal itself. Before we continue, comment below where you're watching from, and salute to everyone who stays humble, no matter how famous they become. Because what's about to happen next? Marcus has no idea what he just started. Keanu didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pull rank or drop his name or make a scene. He just nodded slowly, like he understood. Like he'd been here before, not in this gym, but in this moment. The moment where someone decides who you are before you even get a chance to speak. "I understand," he said calmly. "Maybe I can just use the bag in the corner. I'll stay out of everyone's way." His tone was respectful, genuine. He wasn't trying to win an argument. He just wanted to train. But Marcus saw it differently. He saw weakness. He saw someone backing down, and that only fed his ego more. Marcus stepped closer, invading Keanu's personal space. Close enough that Keanu could smell the coffee on his breath. Close enough to make it clear this wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a power play. "You don't get it, do you?" Marcus said, his voice low and sharp. "This is my gym, my rules. And rule number 1, I don't train pretenders." Keanu stayed still. His eyes didn't drop, didn't waver, but he didn't escalate either. He just breathed, centered, calm. That's when one of the younger fighters spoke up. A kid named Jamie, 19, lean, talented, but still learning. He'd been training at Iron Fist for about 6 months, and he'd seen this routine before. Marcus picking on someone new, humiliating them, making a show of it, and Jamie was tired of it. "Coach, come on, man," Jamie said, stepping forward. "He's just asking to." Marcus's head snapped toward him like a viper. "Shut it, Jamie." His voice was ice cold. "Or you're running stairs till you puke." Jamie's mouth opened, then closed. He looked at Keanu apologetically, but said nothing else. He couldn't afford to. He needed this gym, needed the training. So he stepped back, eyes down, fists clenched at his sides. Marcus turned back to Keanu, his smirk returning. "See, even my students know when to keep their mouths shut." He paused, tilting his head like a thought just occurred to him. "Tell you what, movie star, you want in? You want to train at my gym?" He spread his arms wide, voice dripping with mockery. "Prove you belong. 3-minute sparring session. With me. Right now." The gym went dead quiet. Every conversation stopped. Every movement froze. All eyes turned toward the center of the room. Phones were already out. Some people started recording. This was about to be a moment. Keanu looked at Marcus for a long beat. Then he spoke, his voice still calm, still even. "I didn't come here to fight anyone." Marcus's grin widened. "That's what I thought." He shook his head slowly, playing to the crowd, all image, no substance. He let the words hang in the air for effect. And then, he shoved Keanu's shoulder, not hard, not violent, but enough to make a point. Enough to assert dominance, enough to humiliate. Still, Keanu didn't react. He absorbed the push, shifted his weight slightly to stay balanced, and remained perfectly still. His face didn't change, no anger, no fear, no pride, just presence. He looked Marcus directly in the eyes and said, quietly but clearly, "Respect isn't proven by hurting people. It's earned by how you treat them when no one's watching." For a split second, just a flash, something flickered across Marcus's face, doubt, shame, awareness. But it was gone as fast as it came, his jaw clenched, his face twisted. "Oh, so now you're gonna lecture me?" Marcus's voice rose sharp and venomous. "In MY Gym?" He stepped even closer, chest to chest now. "You think, because you're famous, you can walk in here and teach me about respect? You don't know the first thing about this world. About what it takes to survive here, to build something from nothing." Keanu didn't move, didn't back up. He just kept his eyes steady. "I'm not trying to teach you anything," Keanu said softly. "I'm just asking to be treated like a human being." That was it. That was the line that broke Marcus. Because deep down, somewhere buried under all that bravado and bitterness, he knew Keanu was right, and he hated him for it. Marcus's hand shot out. He grabbed Keanu's wrist, his left wrist, and twisted it backward, hard, forcing Keanu's arm into an awkward angle, a joint lock. A control technique, the kind of move meant to hurt, to dominate, to force submission. He yanked Keanu toward the door, his grip tight, his face inches away. "Get out," Marcus hissed through gritted teeth. "And don't come back unless you're ready to bleed." The gym was frozen. Some people gasped, others just stared, mouths open, unable to process what they were seeing. A coach physically assaulting someone, a customer, a person who just wanted to train. Melissa, the receptionist, looked horrified. Her hand covered her mouth. Jamie clenched his fist so hard his knuckles went white. And the older members, the ones who'd been around long enough to know better, just shook their heads in disgust. But nobody moved. Nobody intervened. Because that's how fear works. It paralyzes. And then, in one smooth motion, so fast that most people didn't even see it happen, Keanu rotated his wrist. Not violently, not aggressively, just efficiently. He redirected the pressure, slipped out of Marcus's grip, and in the same fluid movement, gently but firmly placed Marcus in a standing wrist lock, a textbook reversal. The kind you only pull off if you've done it 1,000 times. If your muscle memory is so ingrained that your body moves before your brain even registers the threat. Marcus's eyes went wide. His mouth opened in shock. His knees buckled slightly as the pain shot up his forearm. Not unbearable, not damaging, but undeniable. Let go, Marcus stammered, his voice suddenly small. Keanu held the position for just 2 seconds. Long enough to make the point. Long enough for everyone to see. And then he released him immediately and stepped back, hands open, non-threatening. I didn't come here for this, Keanu said quietly, his voice steady and calm. I came to train, but I won't be disrespected. Marcus stumbled backward, shaking out his wrist, his face bright red, not from pain, from embarrassment, from rage, from the crushing realization that he'd just been effortlessly controlled by someone he'd dismissed as a pretender. The gym was absolutely silent. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, the distant sound of traffic outside. Breathing. Phones were definitely recording now. Multiple angles, multiple witnesses. This was going to be everywhere. Marcus's chest heaved. His fists clenched and unclenched. He looked around the room at his students, his staff, the people who were supposed to fear him, and saw something he hadn't seen in years. Doubt. They weren't looking at him like a leader anymore. They were looking at him like a bully who just got checked, and Marcus couldn't handle it. You just made the worst mistake of your life, he hissed, his voice shaking with fury. He turned on his heel and stormed toward his office, shoving past a heavy bag on the way, nearly knocking it off its chain. He disappeared into the back room and slammed the door so hard the walls shook. The sound echoed through the gym like a gunshot. And then, silence again. Keanu stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, centering himself. He looked around the room, not defensively, not proudly, just aware. He made eye contact with Melissa, who looked like she was about to cry. He gave her a small nod. It's okay. Then he turned to leave. He slung his gym bag back over his shoulder and started walking toward the exit. But before he reached the door, "Yo, wait." It was Jamie. The young fighter jogged up to him, eyes wide, voice urgent. Are you okay? Jamie asked. Keanu stopped and turned. I'm fine. Thanks for speaking up earlier. Jamie shook his head, still in disbelief. Dude, that was insane. I've been training here for 2 years, and I've never seen anyone do that to Coach Marcus. Who taught you that? Keanu smiled softly, a genuine smile. Warm, a lot of people. Over a lot of years. Jamie just stared at him, speechless. And then, from the back corner of the gym, a voice, quiet, steady. Older, you handled that well. Keanu turned. An older man stood near the wall. Mid-60s, gray beard, neatly trimmed, calm eyes, weathered hands. He was wearing a faded Marines t-shirt and old boxing wraps around his wrists. His name was Frank Ruiz, former Marine, former boxing trainer to champions. He'd been sitting in the back the whole time, watching everything unfold in silence. Frank walked over slowly, his movements deliberate, controlled. Most men would have swung back. Frank said. Keanu met his gaze. Violence isn't strength. Restraint is. Frank studied him for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. I know who you are, Frank said. I also know you've trained with the best. Judo, jiu-jitsu, boxing, Krav Maga, am I right? Keanu shook his hand, grip firm but not aggressive. I've been lucky to learn from some great people. Frank chuckled, a low, knowing sound. Lucky. He shook his head. Son, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. You've put in the work. Jamie's eyes widened even more. Wait, you actually know how to fight? Like for real? Before Keanu could answer, the office door flew open. Marcus stormed out. But this time he wasn't alone. He had his phone in his hand, and on speaker was a voice that made even Frank's expression shift slightly. A voice that carried weight, authority, money. Marcus, what's going on? It was a man's voice, deep, calm, but with an edge that said, I don't have time for nonsense. Marcus's face was still red, but now there was something else in his eyes. Desperation. Monsieur Castillo, Marcus said, his voice tight. We have a situation. Drop a comment, respect. If you think humility and skill should always go hand in hand. Because what's about to happen next? Nobody saw coming. Mr. Castillo, we have a situation. Marcus repeated, his voice tight and controlled, but with an unmistakable tremor underneath. He was trying to sound authoritative, in control. But anyone paying attention could hear it, the crack in his composure. The voice on the other end didn't respond right away, just silence. The kind of silence that makes you sweat. Marcus cleared his throat and continued, pacing near the office door, phone held out in front of him on speaker so the entire gym could hear. Some actor came in here, assaulted me, and now he's trying to recruit my students. Lie after lie, smooth, confident, calculated. Marcus had done this before, twisted the truth, spun the narrative, made himself the victim. And it usually worked. Because who was going to challenge him? Who was going to contradict the man who ran the gym? Jamie's jaw dropped. He looked at Keanu, then back at Marcus, his face a mixture of shock and anger. That's not what happened, Jamie muttered under his breath. But he didn't say it loud enough for Marcus to hear. Not yet. Keanu stood near the door, gym bag still over his shoulder, completely still. His face was unreadable, no anger, no fear, no defensiveness, just calm, like he'd been here before, like he knew how this worked. The voice on the phone finally spoke. Marcus, what's going on? The tone was even, measured, but there was something underneath it. Something sharp. This wasn't a man who tolerated nonsense. Marcus's face lit up slightly. He thought he had the upper hand now. Mr. Castillo, I'm trying to protect the integrity of this gym. This guy walks in, no respect, starts causing trouble, puts his hands on me. Put him on. The voice interrupted. Marcus froze. I'm sorry. Put him on the phone. Now. Marcus's face twitched. For a split second, his mask slipped confusion, panic. But he recovered quickly, forced a smirk, and held the phone toward Keanu. He wants to talk to you, Marcus said, his voice dripping with false confidence. Like this was somehow a trap he was setting. Keanu walked forward slowly, his steps quiet, deliberate. He stopped a few feet from Marcus and spoke calmly into the phone. Hello, Mr. Castillo. My name is, I know who you are, Keanu. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't detonated yet. Keanu's expression didn't change, but Marcus's did. His smirk faltered. His eyes narrowed. You know him? Marcus asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. There was a pause on the other end, and when Ricardo Castillo spoke again, his voice had turned ice cold. Marcus? He said slowly, deliberately. Do you have any idea who you just disrespected? The gym went completely silent. Every single person stopped what they were doing. Weights hit the floor. Jump ropes went slack. Even the music playing faintly in the background seemed to fade. Marcus's face drained of color. His mouth opened, closed. Opened again. Mr. Castillo, I don't understand. Keanu Reeves, Castillo said, his tone sharp and precise, has been a silent investor in my company for the last 3 years. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Jamie's jaw literally fell open. Frank's eyebrows raised slightly, though he didn't look surprised, more like confirmed. Melissa, the receptionist, gasped audibly and covered her mouth with both hands. And Marcus. Marcus looked like someone had just punched him in the gut. His face went from red to white in seconds. His hands started to tremble. He helped fund the youth programs. Castillo continued, his voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. The equipment upgrades. The scholarship fund for underprivileged kids who want to train but can't afford it. Every word was a hammer blow. Marcus swayed slightly on his feet. Jamie turned to look at Keanu, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Keanu remained still. Quiet. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't say I told you so. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, like this was all very normal. Castillo wasn't finished. But more than that, he said, his voice softening just slightly, not out of kindness, but out of respect. Keanu is one of the most disciplined martial artists I've ever met. Marcus's breathing became shallow. He's trained with the same intensity as any professional fighter. Not for fame, not for movies, not for publicity, but because he respects the craft. Frank nodded slowly from the back of the gym, his arms crossed, watching Marcus like a teacher watching a student fail a test they should have studied for. Sir. Marcus's voice cracked. I didn't know. That's the problem, Marcus. Castillo's tone was sharp again. Final. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You saw someone you thought was beneath you, and you treated him like garbage. Marcus tried to speak, but his throat tightened. No words came out. I was just... He finally managed, his voice weak. Protecting the gym's reputation. Be assaulting a paying customer. Castillo's voice rose slightly, not shouting, but the kind of controlled anger that's somehow worse. By lying to me on the phone. By humiliating someone in front of your entire staff. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came. He looked around the room desperately, like he was searching for allies. But nobody met his eyes, not his assistants, not his regulars, not even the people who usually laughed at his jokes. They all just looked away. And then Jamie stepped forward. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking, but he'd had enough. I have the whole thing on video, Jamie said, his voice louder than he expected. Marcus's head snapped toward him, eyes blazing with fury. But Jamie didn't back down this time. He held up his phone screen facing out. He twisted Keanu's wrist. He shoved him. He lied about everything. Jamie, you little, enough. Castillo's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Marcus froze. Send me that video, Jamie, Castillo said calmly. Right now, yes, sir, Jamie said, his fingers already moving across his phone screen. Marcus's face twisted into something between rage and desperation. He looked like a cornered animal. Sir, please, Marcus said, his voice breaking now, all pretense gone. This is my life. This gym is everything to me. I made a mistake. I'll apologize, I'll make it right. You're suspended, Castillo said flatly. Effective immediately. The words landed like a death sentence. Marcus's knees nearly buckled. Sir, clean out your locker. Turn in your keys. I'm flying in tonight. We'll handle the rest in person after I review everything. Mr. Castillo, please, I'm begging you. Goodbye, Marcus. The line went dead. The silence that followed was suffocating. Marcus stood there, phone still in his hand, staring at the screen like it might come back to life and tell him this was all a mistake. But it didn't. He looked around the gym one more time. At the people he'd bullied, at the students he'd broken down, at the staff he'd terrorized, and all he saw now was judgment. Nobody said a word. But they didn't have to. Marcus's hands dropped to his sides. His shoulders sagged. For the first time in years, maybe ever, he looked small. Keanu, who had been standing quietly the entire time, turned to leave. He didn't gloat, didn't make a speech, didn't rub it in. He just started walking toward the door. But then, wait, it was Marcus. His voice was barely a whisper. Keanu stopped, didn't turn around immediately. Just stopped. I'm sorry. The words came out broken, raw. Keanu slowly turned around. Marcus was looking at the ground, his fists clenched at his sides, jaw tight. I'm serious, Marcus said louder this time, forcing himself to look up. I was wrong. His eyes were red now, not crying, but close. I judged you. I disrespected you. I put my hands on you. And then I lied because I was embarrassed. His voice cracked on the last word. Keanu just stood there listening, not interrupting, not dismissing, just present. Marcus took a shaky breath. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I'm tough, that I'm in control, that I matter. He paused, swallowing hard. And the truth is, I've been a bully. To my students, to people like you, to anyone who made me feel small. He looked around the gym, at Jamie, at Frank, at the faces watching him. And I hate that about myself. For the first time, the arrogance was completely gone. The mask had fallen, and what was left was just a broken man realizing the damage he'd done. I don't expect you to forgive me, just said quietly. But I want you to know, you just taught me something I should have learned a long time ago. The gym was still silent, everyone watching, waiting to see what Keanu would do. He could walk away. He had every right to. He could let Marcus suffer, let him lose everything. But instead, Keanu walked over, slowly, calmly, and he extended his hand. Marcus looked at it like he didn't believe it was real. We'll all make mistakes, Keanu said softly. What matters is what you do next. Marcus stared at him for a long moment, and then with trembling hands, he reached out and shook it. His grip was weak. His eyes were wet, but for the first time in years, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, humility. Now drop a comment, rest PT, if you think humility and skill should always go hand in hand, because what happens next? It's going to restore your faith in second chances. Mr. Castillo, I don't understand. Marcus's voice had cracked when he first heard the name, but now, standing in the middle of his gym, phone still trembling in his hand, the full weight of what had just happened was beginning to sink in. Ricardo Castillo wasn't just a businessman. He was the businessman, owner of Iron Fist Gyms, a chain of 20 locations across California, Nevada, and Arizona, hundreds of trainers, thousands of members, millions of dollars in revenue, a reputation built on discipline, results, and old school values. And Marcus had just lied to him, on speaker, in front of witnesses, with video evidence. Keanu Reeves has been a silent investor in my company for the last 3 years. Those words kept echoing in Marcus's head, over and over, like a bell he couldn't unring. Silent investor, 3 years. Marcus's legs felt weak. He looked at Keanu, who was still standing near the door, calm as ever, like none of this had rattled him in the slightest. How could someone be so calm? How could someone who just got disrespected, assaulted, and lied about just stand there like it was a normal Tuesday? Castillo's voice had continued on the phone, sharp and unforgiving. He helped fund the youth programs. Marcus's mind flashed to the new equipment that had arrived 6 months ago. The heavy bags, the speed bags, the updated flooring in the back training room. He'd assumed Castillo had just decided to reinvest profits. He never asked where the money came from, the equipment upgrades. Marcus thought about the scholarships. The kids who trained for free because they couldn't afford memberships. The ones Marcus had always seen as charity cases, necessary for publicity, but not real fighters. He'd complained about them more than once. Why are we wasting resources on kids who'll never go pro? That's what he'd said to Castillo during their last quarterly review call. Castillo had just smiled and said, "Because it's the right thing to do." Marcus hadn't understood it then. He was starting to now. The scholarship fund for underprivileged kids who want to train, but can't afford it. Every word Castillo spoke felt like a knife. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. Jamie stood off to the side, phone still in his hand, the video saved, already sent to Castillo's email. His face was a mixture of shock, anger, and something else, relief. Relief that someone had finally stood up to Marcus. Relief that the truth was finally out. Frank Ruiz leaned against the wall in the back, arms crossed, watching everything unfold with the calm detachment of someone who'd seen this kind of thing before. He'd been a trainer for over 30 years. He knew egos. He knew bullies. And he knew when a man's world was about to come crashing down. Melissa, the receptionist, had both hands over her mouth, her eyes wide, barely breathing. She'd worked at Iron Fist for 2 years. She'd seen Marcus humiliate people before. She'd heard the comments, the insults, the cruelty disguised as tough love. But she'd never seen him checked like this. Never seen him stripped of his power so completely. And the rest of the gym, silent, frozen, watching. Some with their phones out. Some just staring. Some with expressions of quiet satisfaction, because most of them had been on the receiving end of Marcus's ego at some point. And now they were watching karma play out in real time. Castillo's voice came through the phone again, and this time there was something different in his tone. Not anger, respect, but more than that, Castillo said, and the room leaned in. Keanu is one of the most disciplined martial artists I've ever met. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Castillo continued, "He's trained with the same intensity as any professional fighter. Not for fame, not for movies, not for publicity." Each word hit like a jab, but because he respects the craft. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He'd called Keanu a pretender, a fake, an actor playing dress up. And now he was being told, by his own boss, the man who owned the gym, that Keanu was the real deal, more real than Marcus had ever been. Frank nodded slowly from the back, a knowing look on his face. He'd suspected as much. You didn't move the way Keanu had moved, that smooth, effortless wrist reversal, without years of high-level training. That wasn't choreography. That was muscle memory. That was someone who'd been put in joint locks 1,000 times and learned how to escape them in his sleep. Jamie's eyes were wide, his mind racing. He thought back to the way Keanu had handled the situation. No panic, no aggression, no ego, just control, complete, total control. That's what separated amateurs from professionals. Amateurs reacted. Professionals responded. And Keanu, he was a professional. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out weak and broken. "Sir, I didn't know." "That's the problem, Marcus." Castillo's tone was sharp again, final, like a judge reading a sentence. "You didn't know because you didn't care to know." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. You saw someone you thought was beneath you, and you treated him like garbage. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, wanted to say he was just protecting the gym, maintaining standards, keeping out the phonies. But the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, he knew Castillo was right. He hadn't cared. He'd made a snap judgment based on appearances, old sneakers, faded jeans, a quiet demeanor, and he'd decided in 2 seconds that Keanu wasn't worth his time, wasn't worth respect, wasn't worthy of being in his gym, and now he was paying the price. Marcus's voice cracked as he tried again. "I was just protecting the gym's reputation. Be assaulting a paying customer." Castillo's voice rose, just slightly, but it was enough to make Marcus flinch. "Be lying to me on the phone." By humiliating someone in front of your entire staff? Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He felt his throat tighten, his chest constrict. He looked around the room desperately, searching for someone, anyone, who might back him up. But every face he saw either looked away or stared back with quiet judgment. Nobody was coming to his rescue. Not this time. And that's when Jamie stepped forward. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His hands were shaking. But he'd had enough. Enough of watching Marcus bully people. Enough of staying silent. Enough of being afraid. I have the whole thing on video, Jamie said, his voice louder and steadier than he expected. Marcus's head whipped toward him, eyes blazing with fury and betrayal. Jamie, you little. But Jamie didn't back down. Not this time. He raised his phone, screen facing out, showing the paused video. Clear as day. Marcus grabbing Keanu's wrist, Marcus shoving him, Marcus twisting his arm, and then Keanu's smooth, controlled reversal. He twisted Keanu's wrist. Jamie said, his voice firm now. He shoved him. He tried to force him out the door. And then he lied about all of it. Marcus's face went from red to purple. His fists clenched. His jaw tightened so hard it looked like his teeth might crack. But he didn't say anything, because what could he say? The evidence was right there, time-stamped, recorded, undeniable. Castillo's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Send me that video, Jamie. Right now. Yes, sir. Jamie replied immediately, his fingers already moving across the screen. Within seconds, the video was sent. Email, text, cloud link, every possible way to make sure it got to Castillo. Marcus watched it happen, his face pale, his breathing shallow. He looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in slow motion. And in a way, he was. Castillo's voice came through one last time, calm but absolute. Marcus, you're suspended. Effective immediately. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Marcus's knees buckled slightly. He grabbed the edge of a nearby bench to steady himself. Sir, he started, his voice breaking. Clean out your locker. Turn in your keys. I'm flying in tonight. We'll handle the rest in person after I review everything. Mr. Castillo, please. Goodbye, Marcus. The line went dead. The dial tone echoed in the silence. Marcus stared at his phone, the screen still glowing, the call ended, the connection severed. He stood there frozen, like his brain couldn't process what had just happened. Suspended, effective immediately. The gym, his gym, the place he'd poured years of his life into, the place that defined him, was no longer his. Not right now, maybe not ever again. He looked around one more time, at the faces staring back at him, at Jamie, who still held his phone up like a shield, at Frank, who watched him with quiet disappointment, at Melissa, whose hands were still covering her mouth, at the other members, some of whom were still recording, some of whom were whispering to each other, some of whom just looked sad, and then at Keanu, who hadn't moved, hadn't gloated, hadn't said a single word. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, calm and centered, like he'd already moved on. Marcus's shoulders sagged. His hands fell to his sides. For the first time in years, maybe in his entire life, he felt small, not physically, but in every other way that mattered. Keanu turned toward the door, still no speech, no triumph. He was just going to leave, walk away, let Marcus deal with the consequences of his own actions. But then, wait, the word came out barely above a whisper. Keanu stopped. He didn't turn around right away, just paused, waiting. Marcus took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. His voice cracked on the words. Keanu turned slowly. Marcus was staring at the ground, fists clenched, jaw tight, fighting to keep himself together. I'm serious, Marcus said, forcing himself to look up to meet Keanu's eyes. I was wrong. His voice was raw now. No more bravado, no more armor, just honesty. Painful, humiliating honesty. I judged you before you even said a word. I disrespected you. I put my hands on you. He swallowed hard. And then I lied about it because I was too embarrassed to admit I was wrong. Keanu didn't interrupt, didn't accept the apology yet, didn't reject it either. He just listened. Marcus continued, his voice shaking. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I'm tough, that I'm in control, that I'm somebody. He looked around the gym, at the heavy bags, the ring, the walls covered in old fight posters. I built this reputation, this image, and somewhere along the way, I forgot what it was supposed to be for. He turned back to Keanu. I became exactly what I hated, a bully, someone who tears people down to feel strong. His voice dropped to almost a whisper, and I hate that about myself. The gym was silent. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Everyone just watched. Marcus took another breath, steadier this time. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know. He paused, his eyes glistening. You just taught me something I should have learned a long time ago. Keanu looked at him for a long moment, studying him, not with judgment, with understanding, because Keanu had been there before. Not in this exact situation, but in moments where he'd had to choose. React with anger or respond with grace. Punish someone, or give them a chance to grow. Hold a grudge or let it go. And every time he'd chosen the harder path, The one that required more strength, more discipline, more humanity. He walked toward Marcus slowly, calmly, and extended his hand. Marcus stared at it like it was the last lifeline in the world. We all make mistakes, Keanu said softly. What matters is what you do next. Marcus's hands trembled as he reached out. He gripped Keanu's hand, not with strength, but with desperation, with gratitude, with the weight of a man who'd just been given a second chance he didn't think he deserved. Thank you. 2 weeks later, Marcus whispered. Iron Fist Jim nodded once from the outside, and then he let go, stepped back, and turned toward the door again. This time, early morning time of activity, no dramatics, no final words. Everything else had changed, just gone. The energy was different. Softly behind him. The air felt lighter, and the gym exhaled. People smiled more, dropped respect in the comments. Trained with focus, second chances can change lives. And at the center of it all, because what happens next is given a second chance. Marcus was back, but not as head coach, not as the Hammer, not as the king ruling over his kingdom. He'd asked quietly, humbly to step down. When Ricardo Castillo flew in that Thursday night, Marcus met him in the parking lot before he even entered the building. He handed over his keys, his whistle, his clipboard with all the training schedules. I don't deserve to lead this place, Marcus had said, his voice steady but low. Not after what I did. Castillo had studied him for a long moment. You're right, he'd said simply.
You don't, not yet.
And then he'd offered Marcus a choice, leave entirely, walk away, start over somewhere else, or stay, as an assistant coach, under new leadership, with no authority, no spotlight, no ego, just work, hard, humbling, honest work. Marcus had chosen to stay. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. And so, for the past 2 weeks, Marcus had been doing things he hadn't done in years. Cleaning equipment after training sessions, mopping floors, helping beginners wrap their hands, holding pads for students he used to bark orders at, listening instead of lecturing, learning instead of assuming he already knew everything, and leading the new training program. Frank Ruiz. Castillo had promoted him to head coach the very next day. Frank had been hesitant at first. I'm old, he'd said with a dry smile. I'm supposed to be retired. You're experienced, Castillo had replied, and this gym needs someone who leads with respect, not fear. Frank had accepted, and in 2 weeks, he'd transformed the culture completely. No more yelling, no more public humiliation, no more fear-based coaching, instead, patience, precision, encouragement. He pushed people hard, but he built them up while doing it. You're stronger than you think, he'd tell someone struggling with footwork. That's it. Now do it again. You've got this. The students responded immediately. They trained harder, stayed longer, helped each other. Because they weren't afraid anymore, they were inspired. And Keanu, he came back, not for publicity, not to make a statement, not to prove anything, just to train. He showed up quietly one Monday morning, gym bag over his shoulder, same worn-out Nike, same calm demeanor. Melissa saw him first. Her eyes went wide, but this time she smiled. Welcome back, Mr. Reeves. Just Keanu, he said with a warm smile. And thanks. Let me get frank. No need. I'll just grab a bag in the corner. Don't want to interrupt anyone. But word spread fast. Within minutes, people noticed. And instead of phones coming out, instead of whispers and stares, people just nodded. Respectful, welcoming. A few came up to shake his hand. Thanks for what you did. One older man said quietly. You didn't have to come back. A young woman added. But I'm glad you did. Keanu just smiled. I love this gym. Frank walked over, wiping his hands on a towel, a grin spreading across his weathered face. Good to see you, brother. They shook hands firm, genuine. Good to be back, Keanu replied. Want to go a few rounds? Frank asked, nodding toward the ring. I'd love that. And just like that, Keanu stepped into the rhythm of the gym. No special treatment, no VIP section, just another person there to work. He hit the heavy bag, worked the speed bag, stretched, shadowboxed. And when Frank called him into the ring for light sparring, Keanu moved with the same fluid precision that had shocked Marcus 2 weeks earlier. Footwork clean, hands up, movement economical, no wasted energy, no showboating, just skill, pure, refined, beautiful skill. Jamie watched from the sidelines, mesmerized. He'd been training with Keanu a few times over the past 2 weeks. Keanu had offered, casually after one of Jamie's sessions. You've got good instincts, Keanu had said. Want to work on your combinations. Jamie had nearly fainted. Now watching Keanu move in the ring with Frank, Jamie realized something. Keanu wasn't just skilled. He was humble enough to keep learning, even at his level. Even with all his experience, he still asked questions, still took notes, still treated every session like he was a beginner. That's what separated good from great. Great fighters never stop being students. After the session, Keanu climbed out of the ring, grabbed a towel, and caught his breath. That's when Marcus approached, slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a wounded animal, not because Keanu was dangerous, but because Marcus wasn't sure he'd be welcome. "Hey," Marcus said quietly. Keanu turned, wiping sweat from his face. "Hey." There was a pause, awkward, heavy. Marcus shifted his weight, hands in his pockets. I just wanted to say thank you for coming back." Keanu nodded. "Of course. I know you didn't have to. After what I did, Marcus," Keanu interrupted gently. "We already talked about this. You apologized. I accepted, it's done." Marcus swallowed hard. "I know. But I need you to understand. I'm not the same person I was 2 weeks ago." Keanu studied him. "I can see that." Marcus looked around the gym, at the students training, at Frank coaching, at the energy that felt completely different now. "I've spent the last 2 weeks doing grunt work, cleaning, assisting, helping beginners." He paused, "and honestly, it's been the best 2 weeks of my life." Keanu raised an eyebrow, curious. Marcus continued, "I forgot what it felt like to just help someone, without expecting anything in return, without needing them to worship me or fear me." His voice softened. "I forgot what it felt like to be part of something bigger than my own ego." Keanu smiled slightly. "That's growth, man. Real growth." Marcus nodded, his throat tight. "I've been a coach for 15 years, and I've been doing it wrong the whole time." He looked Keanu in the eyes. "But I'm learning, and I wanted you to know, you're the reason why." Keanu put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You're the reason why? You made the choice. I just showed you a mirror." Marcus's eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. "Well, thank you for that mirror." Keanu squeezed his shoulder once, then let go. "Keep going. You're on the right path." Marcus nodded, took a breath, and walked back toward the equipment room to finish his work. But this time, he walked with his head a little higher. Not with arrogance, with purpose. Later that week, something unexpected happened. Jamie was working the heavy bag when a new kid walked in. 17, maybe 18, skinny, nervous, clearly out of place. He approached the front desk, fidgeting with his backpack straps. "I'm here for the scholarship program." Melissa smiled warmly. "Of course. What's your name?" "Daniel." "Great, Daniel. Let me get someone to show you around." She called over Marcus. A month ago, Marcus would have rolled his eyes, would have complained about babysitting beginners, would have passed the kid off to someone else. But now, Marcus walked over with a genuine smile. "Hey, Daniel. I'm Marcus. Welcome to Iron Fist." Daniel looked up at him.
Wyatt, you're the coach?
Marcus chuckled. "Assistant coach. But yeah, I'll be helping you get started." He extended his hand. Daniel shook it, still nervous but a little less so. "Come on," Marcus said. "Let me show you the basics. And don't worry, everyone starts somewhere." As they walked toward the training area, Jamie watched, a small smile on his face. That was the Marcus he'd hoped existed, the one buried under all the ego and insecurity. And now, finally, that version was starting to surface. By the end of the second week, the gym had settled into a new rhythm. Frank led the advanced classes with precision and wisdom. Marcus assisted, learning as much as he taught. Keanu trained quietly, offering tips here and there when asked, but never imposing. Jamie had improved dramatically, his confidence growing with every session. And the scholarship kids, the ones Marcus used to dismiss, were thriving. One evening, as the gym was winding down, Castillo made a surprise visit. He walked in unannounced, observed for 30 minutes, and then gathered everyone in the center of the floor. "I just want to say something," Castillo began, his voice calm but commanding. Everyone stopped and listened. 2 weeks ago, this gym was at a crossroads. We had talent. We had equipment. We had a reputation. He paused. But we didn't have respect. We didn't have culture. We didn't have heart. He looked around the room. Today, we do. People nodded, some smiled. Castillo continued. "I've watched how you've all responded to change, how you've supported each other, how you've chosen growth over comfort." His eyes landed on Marcus. "And I've watched people earn back trust they thought they'd lost forever." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he held Castillo's gaze. Castillo turned to Frank. "Frank, you've led with integrity and wisdom. This place is better because of you." Frank nodded humbly, just doing what's right. Then Castillo looked at Keanu, and "Keanu, thank you. For your investment, for your patience, for showing us what real strength looks like." Keanu smiled. "I didn't do much. Just showed up, sometimes." Castillo said, "That's everything." The room was silent, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes when people feel united. When they're part of something meaningful. Castillo clapped his hands together once. All right, back to work. Let's keep building. As people dispersed, Keanu grabbed his bag and started heading out. Marcus caught up to him near the door. Keanu. Keanu stopped, turned. Marcus hesitated, then spoke. I know I've said this before, but thank you, not just for forgiving me, but for believing I could be better. Keanu smiled. You are better. Keep going. Marcus nodded. And as Keanu walked out into the cool evening air, Marcus stood there for a moment, watching him go. Then he turned back toward the gym. His gym, not because he owned it, but because he finally understood what it meant to serve it. Type GROWH in the comments if you believe people can change when given the chance. Because the final part, it's going to tie everything together. 3 months later, Iron Fist Gym held its first annual charity tournament. The parking lot was packed. Cars lined the street for 2 blocks. Inside, the gym had been transformed. 2 rings set up. Bleachers brought in. Banners hanging from the rafters. Local news cameras. Community sponsors. Families filling the seats. And at the center of it all, a cause that mattered, all proceeds, every single dollar from ticket sales, concessions, raffles, and donations, went directly to the Youth Scholarship Fund. The fund that gave kids like Daniel a chance. Kids who couldn't afford a gym membership but had the heart of a fighter. Kids who just needed someone to believe in them. The event had been Frank's idea, but it was Marcus who'd worked the hardest to make it happen. He'd spent weeks coordinating, reaching out to local businesses for sponsorships, organizing volunteers, setting up the rims, printing programs, handling logistics, not because he had to, not because anyone was watching, but because it mattered. And for the first time in his life, Marcus understood what it meant to work for something bigger than himself. The tournament started at noon. Young fighters, amateur brackets, clean, controlled bouts with proper refs and safety protocols. The energy in the room was electric. Parents cheering, coaches shouting encouragement, kids nervously warming up in the corners. And in the middle of it all, Keanu, not as a celebrity guest, not as a sponsor being paraded around for photo ops, just as a volunteer. He helped set up the rings that morning, carried water bottles to the fighters between rounds, taped hands in the back when the official cutman got overwhelmed, signed a few autographs. Sure, he wasn't going to be rude, but mostly, he just showed up, quietly, humbly, like he'd been doing for 3 months. People had stopped treating him like a novelty. He was just Keanu. Another person who loved the gym, another person who respected the craft, another person who believed in giving back. Marcus ran the event alongside Frank, and if you'd told someone 3 months ago that Marcus Davidson would be the guy making sure every kid felt welcome, felt safe, felt valued, they wouldn't have believed you. But here he was, kneeling down to talk to a nervous 10-year-old before his first match. Hey buddy, you got this. Just remember what we practiced, okay? Breathe, stay loose, have fun. The kid nodded, wide-eyed. You're gonna be great, Marcus said with a genuine smile. The kid's father, standing nearby, caught Marcus's eye and mouthed 2 words, thank you. Marcus nodded back, and in that moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: pride. Not the arrogant kind, not the kind that needed validation or applause, but the quiet kind, the kind that comes from knowing you did something right, the kind that comes from helping someone else succeed. As the day went on, the tournament ran smoothly, close fights, good sportsmanship, respect between competitors. Jamie fought in the teen division and won his bracket. When his hand was raised, he looked over at Keanu, who was standing near the ropes, and grinned. Keanu gave him a thumbs up. No big celebration, no showboating, just quiet acknowledgement between 2 people who'd worked hard together. Daniel, the scholarship kid Marcus had welcomed on his first day, fought too. He didn't win, but he went 3 full rounds, gave everything he had, and walked out of that ring with his head high. Marcus met him at the ropes, draped a towel over his shoulders. You were incredible, Marcus said. I lost, Daniel said, breathing hard, disappointed. You fought, Marcus corrected, with heart, with courage. That's all that matters. Daniel looked up at him, eyes glistening. Thanks, coach. Marcus's throat tightened. Anytime, kid. At the end of the night, after the final match, after the medals were handed out, after the crowd began to thin, Ricardo Castillo stepped into the center of the main ring. He held a microphone, his voice echoing through the gym. Can I have everyone's attention, please? The room quieted. Castillo smiled, looking around at the faces young and old, fighters and families, volunteers and sponsors. First, I want to thank every single person who made today possible. The fighters, the coaches, the volunteers, the families who came out to support. Applause filled the room. He waited for it to settle, then continued. This gym was built on toughness, on discipline, on results. He paused, but tonight we learned, or maybe we remembered, that toughness without respect is just cruelty. His voice grew stronger. Real strength isn't about tearing people down. It's about lifting them up. He looked toward the corner where Keanu was standing, trying to stay out of the spotlight as usual. We have someone here tonight who reminded us of that. Not with words, not with lectures, but just by showing up, by being consistent, by treating everyone from champions to beginners with the same respect. Keanu shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the attention, but he didn't leave. Castillo continued. Keanu Reeves has been a silent partner in this company for years. He never asked for recognition, never wanted his name on a banner. He just wanted to help. The room erupted in applause. Keanu smiled, nodded humbly, but didn't move toward the ring. Castillo wasn't finished, but tonight isn't just about thanking him. It's about thanking all of you for choosing growth, for choosing respect, for choosing to be part of something bigger. He turned and looked directly at Marcus, who was standing near the ropes, hands in his pockets. And it's about recognizing that people can change, that second chances matter, that redemption is real. Marcus's eyes met Castillo's. There was no judgment there, just acknowledgement. Castillo raised the microphone one last time. So here's to Iron Fist, not just as a gym, but as a family. The applause was deafening. People stood, cheered, clapped until their hands hurt. And in the middle of it all, Marcus felt something break inside him, not in a painful way, but in the way a dam breaks when the pressure finally releases. He'd spent so many years trying to prove himself, trying to be respected through fear, trying to matter by making others feel small. And now, standing here, watching people celebrate a community he'd almost destroyed, he realized he'd been chasing the wrong thing all along. Respect wasn't taken, it was earned, and the only way to earn it was to give it first. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, after the rings were taken down and the floors were swept, Keanu, Frank, and Marcus sat on the edge of the platform where the main ring had been. 3 men, 3 generations, 3 different paths, but all connected by the same lesson. Frank spoke first, his voice low and thoughtful. You know what I've learned in 30 years of coaching? Keanu and Marcus looked at him. The best fighters aren't the ones with the most talent. They're the ones with the most heart. He looked at Marcus. And heart isn't something you're born with. It's something you choose, every single day. Marcus nodded slowly. Keanu added, it's also something you protect, in yourself, and in others. He looked at both of them. Because the world's hard enough. We don't need to make it harder. The 3 of them sat in silence for a moment, not awkward, just present. Finally Marcus spoke. I spent 15 years being the wrong kind of strong. His voice was quiet but steady. I'm not going to waste the next 15 making the same mistake. Frank clapped him on the shoulder. Keanu smiled. And in that moment, in that empty gym, surrounded by the smell of sweat and chalk and effort, Marcus finally felt like he belonged. Not because he was the loudest, not because he was the toughest, but because he was real. The lesson, respect, is not something you give only to people with power, fame, or status. It's something you give to everyone, especially when you think they don't deserve it. Because one day, the person you disrespected might be the one who shows you grace when you don't deserve it either. True strength is silent. True power is kind. And the most dangerous person in the room is often the one who has nothing to prove. Type RESPT in the comments if you believe humility is real strength. Tell us where you're watching from, and let us know which part hit you the hardest. Was it the moment Keanu reversed the grip? The phone call that changed everything? Marcus's apology? Or the tournament that brought it all together? More powerful stories like this are coming soon. Let us know what kind of content moves you, and we'll keep delivering. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's struggling with ego. Someone who's trying to change. Someone who just needs a reminder that second chances are real. Stay humble. Stay strong. And remember, character is built when no one's watching. And respect is earned one choice at a time. We'll see you in the next one.